To the Malden School Committee special meeting tonight for the interview of the position of Superintendent of Schools with Dr. Margo Ferrick. In accordance with Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, as well as the Governor's August 23rd and December 8th, 2020 revised guidance prohibiting assemblage of more than 25 people, this meeting will be conducted via remote participation. In-person attendance by members of the public is prohibited, but all effort will be made to permit public attendance of this meeting via remote access by internet, telephone, and via public broadcast of the meeting by MATV/Urban Media Arts on public access television channels. Public access will also be provided by posting draft minutes and/or a transcript, recording, or record of the meeting on the City of Malden website at www.cityofmalden.org as soon as practicable after the meeting. This evening's agenda consists of the following. We will first take the roll call. Then we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. And then we will have a moment of silence for all those who have fought for our country. And then we will get into this evening's interview. So why don't we first rise and salute our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence in honor of all those who have fought for our country and continue to do so today. Thank you. All right, we will now have the roll called by Maria Louise.
Mr. Drummy?
Here.
Mr. Froio? I see John.
John on mute.
I see John.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Iavino? Wait, I guess Adam's trying to get him on. Ms. Luong? Here. Mr. McCarthy?
Here.
Ms. Spatafora?
Here.
And Mr. Weldy?
Here.
And Mayor Christensen?
Thank you, Ms. Louise. Here. All right, so we have a quorum sufficient to conduct business. And before we get going, I am also pleased to be joined tonight by Rosetta Languages, who is going to provide live interpretation of this interview. So the first thing we want to do is turn to Danielle of Rosetta Languages to explain how tonight will work. Danielle, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Mayor Gary. Thank you so much. We're really glad to be providing interpretation live into 7 languages tonight. We're going to go through our normal intro routine in the different languages so that everyone knows how to get on the respective channels. For English speakers, you guys can just hold tight for a moment and we will do the intros in all the languages. I'll start with Arabic. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. أهلا وسهلا بكم إلى هذه المقابلة العامة. الليلة سيكون لدينا الترجمة باللغة العربية على قناة الترجمة. يمكنكم الدخول على قناة الترجمة بالضغط على الكرة الأرضية ثم اختيار اللغة العربية Arabic. إذا كنت تتصل من على هاتف محمول فعليك الضغط على 3 نقط للمزيد من الخيارات ثم اختيار اللغة العربية ثم اختيار الترجمة ثم اللغة العربية ثم تم. شكرا جزيلا. إذا كان لديكم أسئلة يمكنكم الكتابة في صندوق الدردشة. Now I'll pass it over to Spanish.
Buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Emily. Estoy aquí con Rosetta Languages. Tenemos interpretación hoy en 7 idiomas y en algunos momenticos después que introducimos los otros idiomas vamos a encender la función de interpretación. Verán en ese entonces en ese momento un iconito con un globo en el fondo de su pantalla. Puede hacer clic ahí y escoger Spanish para recibir la interpretación en su idioma. Muchas gracias y bienvenidos. I pass it over now to Portuguese.
Oi, meu nome é Raíssa, eu vou ser seu intérprete português. Você pode ouvir essa reunião em português, depois que a gente ativa os canais de interpretação. Minutinhos, a gente vai ativar os canais. Um globo vai aparecer na parte de baixo da sua tela. Por favor, escolha esse globo e depois você vai escolher português. Se você estiver participando através de um celular, clique nas 3 bolinhas na parte de baixo da sua tela, você vai escolher interpretação de linguagem, aí você vai escolher português, depois vai pressionar done ou feito. Se você tiver dificuldades, por favor, fale ou pode a sua dúvida no chat e a gente vai te ajudar. I will pass it to Haitian Creole.
Bonsoir, nom c'est Nikita Lamour. Assoya, c'est moi qui a interprété. N'a interprété dans 7 langues assoya. Donc, tout à l'heure, comme ça, nous pouvons mettre fonction interprète là. Mais ça, va aller son petit globe. Ou parlons un globe, sous le cellulaire, il y a 3 points. Il y a 3 points, ou marquer, ou pour quelle langue qui va venir, langue pas nous, la Haitian Creole. Ou cliquer dans Haitian Creole, après ça, ou marquer done. Si c'est le computer, ou seulement cliquer Haitian Creole, les finir langue là, à venir. So, à 7 langues. Donc, si nous avons une question, nous sommes capables de mettre dans le chat là pour modérateur, capable, ouais, soit écrit. Si nous avons une question, ben, tout à l'heure, nous parlons de fonction interprète là. Merci.
And we can pass it to Vietnamese.
Xin chào quý vị, tên tôi là Phương. Tôi sẽ là người thông dịch cho tiếng Việt. Quý vị có thể lắng nghe buổi họp mặt này bằng tiếng Việt bằng cách nhấn vào kênh thông dịch. Thêm vài phút nữa, chúng tôi sẽ mở những kênh này và quý vị sẽ thấy những cái hình tượng của quả địa cầu hiện lên trên màn hình của quý vị. Nhấn vào quả địa cầu và chọn tiếng Việt. Nếu quý vị đang dùng phone thông minh, nhấn vào 3 dấu chấm để lựa chọn thêm, lựa phiên dịch ngôn ngữ, rồi lựa tiếng Việt, sau đó bấm làm xong. Nếu có khó khăn gì, xin vui lòng lên tiếng hoặc viết qua chat và chúng tôi sẽ giúp quý vị. Đồng thời, nếu có phản hồi về sự kiện của ngày hôm nay hoặc nghĩ rằng chúng tôi có thể làm tốt hơn, xin hãy góp ý. And now I'm going to pass it to Terry Mandarin.
Thank you. 大家好，我叫 Terry， 我今天跟大家做这个普通话的翻译哈，我是从 Rosa 的这个语言翻译团队来的。然后今天呢，我跟 Anna 就会给大家翻译广东话和普通话。然后呢，如果你们是需要听普通话的话呢，待会你们在这个屏幕的下方会看到一个地球的按钮，然后你进到这个地球的按钮，选择 Mandarin 就是普通话，就可以听到普通话的翻译了。如果你是用手机或者 iPad 上的话呢，你可以点3个点哈，然后选择更多，也有语言的翻译。好 ，Let me pass this to Anna Cantonese, please.
Thank you. 大家好，我哋係Rosetta 語言翻譯嘅團隊，今天晚上為你提供7種唔同嘅語言翻譯。我係你今晚嘅廣東話同步翻譯員。如果你想聽到廣東話同步翻譯嘅話，咁你喺下面見到個地球儀，咁你撳呢個圖標咧，咁你選擇 Cantonese 就會聽到廣東話噶啦。如果你聽唔到呢個翻譯嘅話咧，即係話咧，可能你個 Zoom 咧係未係最新嘅，咁你就要上去 Zoom 個網址 update 噶啦。Thank you so much， 多謝。
Thank you, Anna. All interpreters, please turn on your microphones. Make sure you are not on mute. And now, Adam, whenever you are ready, you can activate the channels.
All right. The interpretation channels are live.
All right, very good. Thank you. Or as they say in Mandarin, han hao. Very good. So what we're going to do now is, before we pass it over to Dr. Ferrick, we're going to have each of the school committee members introduce themselves, no longer than 20 seconds, 20 to 30 seconds, and we'll do it in ward order. I'll kick it off. So Dr. Ferrick, I'm Gary Christensen, Mayor of Malden and Chairperson of the school committee. I'm also a proud graduate of the Malden Public Schools. I will no longer tell you what year I graduated. And I am also the proud brother of a Malden Public Schools teacher. So watch out. All right.
Nice to meet you.
You as well, and welcome. Let's go to Mr. Drummy.
Hi, good evening, Dr. Ferrick. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Drummy. I'm a Ward 1 school committee member. I've been doing this for about 6 years, and like Gary, I have people in the system. My wife is a para at the Ferryway, and my daughter, unfortunately, is in Lexington, but nepotism being as it is, that's understandable. So welcome and good luck, and nice to see everyone.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
All right, next up, we'll go to Rob McCarthy representing Ward 2.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Dr. Ferrick, it's really nice to meet you. My name is Rob McCarthy. I am the Ward 2 school committee member. I've been on the committee for about 4 years now. I used to have a sister that used to work in the system. I had a parent that worked in the system. And I look forward to your interview tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Leading the way for us from Ward 3 is Jennifer Spatafora.
Hi, Dr. Ferrick.
Nice to see you again.
I will keep my introductions brief because I'm sure you've heard it over and over again, but I am the parent of 3 children, one that is a graduate of Malden High School, 2 that are currently in the system right now. I'm also a proud graduate from Malden Public Schools. I have a background in finance, therefore I am the chair of the budget subcommittee. I'm also chair to our social emotional well-being subcommittee and the liaison to our Malden CPAC.
Great.
All right, and out of Ward 4, we have Mr. Lenny Iovino. Mr. Welda, is Mr. Iovino on?
He is. Lenny is the phone number, but it looks like he's muted, so I'm asking him to unmute. Here we go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Gotcha,
Yep, thank you. After much hassle with my computer here. My name is Len Iovino. I represent Ward 4 of the Malden School Committee. Welcome. I am a lifelong resident of Malden, and I have taught in the Malden Public Schools and served as a school administrator, retiring in 2003 as principal of the Salemwood School. My late wife was also a member of the Malden school teachers. She taught English at the middle school for a period of 35 years. And welcome. I look forward to the interview.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Over to Mr. Weldi representing Ward 5.
Hi, Dr. Ferrick. Adam Weldi from Ward 5. I'm also a proud graduate of the Malden Public Schools, an educator myself, and the proud son of a Malden Public Schools teacher. And I look forward to getting to chat with you again tonight.
Nice to see you again.
Okay, and out of Ward 6, we have Joe Gray.
Good evening. Good evening, Dr. Ferrick.
Hi.
I represent Ward 6, and I really enjoy listening to technology-related reports.
Thank
Nice to meet you.
All right, and representing us from Ward 7, we have Michelle Luong.
Hi, Dr. Ferrick. Nice to meet you. I look forward to this evening. I'm Michelle Luong, representative for School Committee Ward 7. I'm a mom. I have 2 girls. One's just a freshman in college, and one is a high schooler. So my older one is, I spent a lot of years advocating for her because she's dyslexic. So special ed and anything on those lines of gifted, not gifted, ELL, all that stuff is kind of my passion. So I look forward to hearing the interview. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
And finally, leading us in Ward 8 is John Froyle. You're on mute, John. Mr. Froyle, you're on mute. There you go.
Oops.
Mr. Froyle, I think you're on mute.
Right, Adam. Now can you hear me?
Yep.
My name is John Froyle. I believe I'm the senior member of the school committee in age. And I'm a graduate of Malden High School. I'm a representative from Ward 8. And I also have 3 children that graduated the school system.
Nice to meet you.
I'm a retired Malden High School teacher. I don't want to forget that.
All right, very good. Last but not least, Dr. Ferrick. So we're going to turn it over to you to make a brief introduction and tell us in your introduction, why Malden, why now?
Sure, thank you. I want to start with just a quick introduction of who I am as a person first. I am the mother of 3. I have 2 college-age students and a 7th grader who people have heard gives me a run for my money every single day. I will have been married 25 years this summer to my husband, who is my biggest fan, and he is the reason I am sitting here tonight. He encourages me and supports me and genuinely understands the part of who I am is being a public educator, and it's just part of the fabric. It's not a job. It's much more a calling of just how I enter the world on a daily basis. People who know me will tell you that I come from this from being a public educator. It's kind of in my blood. My dad retired as a very successful school superintendent, as did one of his brothers. Another one of his brothers retired as a principal. I have a sister who is a principal of an elementary school up in rural Maine. And I have a brother who is finishing his career as a colonel in the Army. And his last gig before his retirement, he's actually overseeing soldiers that are graduate students at a college in Monterey, California. So it's not all that surprising that I entered the family business, so to speak, but how I did enter it is a little bit different. I entered it through being a social worker, and those foundational years of building those skills and a really deep knowledge of the individual really helped transform who I am as an educator. And that skill set really propelled me into being the go-to person on supporting classrooms, really creating an environment where classroom management, social emotional learning, and rigorous academics met, like really being able to support teachers in creating that sweet spot for themselves and for the students. As I grew in my career, I took over a therapeutic day school. Then really the pinnacle of the work I did in my first district, which was a gateway city, 14,000 student city, was really about creating an alternative, another option of a high school for students who were not being necessarily successful in the big comprehensive high school. And we were able to create really, like, by pulling all the right people together, partners in the community, community college, workforce investment, local passionate people, plus educators and administrators, to really develop a school for what makes, for students to be successful. And that really ended up being an unbelievable opportunity, created what turned out to be an innovation school in my first district, developed on autonomies. So we were able to do things very different. We created anywhere, anytime credits. Kids were being able to take early college classes on site and at the local community college, building skill sets. One of the biggest pieces of work we did was partner with Youth Build, which was an opportunity for students to take academic classes during the day, half of the day, and the other half of the day they were out learning how to be carpenters, taking and passing all the exams they needed to walk out of school and being able to walk into a union shop and get hired. They were building houses for Habitat for Humanity, and that's just one of many pieces. Was able to bring in multi-million dollars of grants in order to create a full-service community school, which allowed the school to become a hub. So that foundational work was really, really entrenched my belief in, honestly, a huge social justice piece of the work, being able to create environments where all kids can thrive and be unbelievably impacted by a school, which led me to taking on the opportunity that I'm in now. I'm the deputy superintendent in Southbridge Public Schools, which is a school district that had been taken over by the state. It had been deemed underperforming back in 2004 and taken over in 2016. So over the past 4 years, really creating school from what happens in the classrooms, in the school buildings for instruction and learning, creating a tiered system of support for academics and social emotional learning, as well as all of the infrastructure that needed to be rebuilt at central office. When I entered Southbridge, we were not able to mail letters. We had no water. We had vendors that would not even speak to us because we had not paid our bills. HR was completely dysfunctional. And we have, over the past 4 years, really been able to create systems and structures that have showing that we're really moving in the right direction. If and when we get back to some sort of normalcy, I think we're going to see some really amazing outcome data, especially in our elementary schools. Our secondary schools are moving in the right direction, just not as fast. And when I decided to think about what's next for me, I talked to a lot of people about whether or not, I'm in the right place and ready to be a superintendent, and was strongly encouraged, including from my boss, my current boss. And the one bit of advice everybody gave me when I had this conversation was really, you want to make the right fit. This isn't just about getting your next job, or the job is too hard. Being a superintendent is one of the most complicated, challenging positions I think anybody can really tackle. And it really made me just start think of looking. And when I saw that Malden was open, I got really excited because, first of all, it's an urban environment and I am all about diversity. I think you walk into a school and you want to see students from all different ethnicities, different languages being spoken, different experiences being celebrated, and really getting everybody to understand each other's differences, because that's what we need. Our kids are going to enter the world, and that's our job, to create really strong, competent adults. So the more we can do that is important in school. And the other piece is, when I was looking at your strategic plan and your core values, the fact that your core value is about doing this in partnership. All of my success is done through collaborative partnerships. I bring an extraordinarily high level of personal integrity, honesty. I believe in very strong, transparent, sometimes to a fault, communication. I think it's really important that we're all on the same page. But none of this work will happen, and my success would not have happened if I hadn't done it in collaboration with, educators, families, community members, partners. That's how we move a district forward. So thank you. I'm really honored to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity. I think you're muted, Mr. Mayor.
There we go. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn it over to the members to ask one question each, and then we'll open it up to questions in general. And so what I'd like to do first is, you spoke about diversity, and I'd like to ask you a question around that.
Sure.
Most of the focus over the past year has been on COVID-19, but I'm proud to say here in Malden, it's also been on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Just today, Malden had its first ever diversity, equity, and inclusion officer begin here in the city. Her name is Bibios LaRochelle, and I'm proud to say she's actually here tonight, watching, and is wanting to get very involved here. So what does meaningful diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you for our schools?
Sure. I think it means that all students and families feel comfortable and are welcome in all of our schools. And I think that the way you create that environment is not by like a one and done professional development. It has to be integrated in the way we do school. So when I think about that, I can give you an example of how we're doing it in Southbridge. Right before I entered Southbridge I started as the assistant superintendent, but in my role, there was a pretty horrific racial incident that happened. And it wasn't horrific that it was named. It was kind of horrific how it all came out and came to fruition. And what we realized was that there was some pretty significant mindset issues with our staff in the community regarding the diversity of our kids. And what we've done is thinking about creating a tiered system of support. And when you think about climate and culture, it's not just about rules and discipline and teaching positive expectations and supporting students where they are and acknowledging what they're doing well. We have to teach students and staff how to interact and understand each other's differences. And that's done by having, honestly, ongoing hard conversations. So as I've shared before, I didn't put this on my resume, but I'm actually also overseeing the high school right now because we had a late summer resignation of the principal and we really struggle with getting really good talent in Southbridge. So one of the first things that I did in the high school is break the high school up into small learning communities for the adults. And much of they meet weekly in small groups. And what we've done is created a cadence of meetings that focuses on, a lot of it is on building the climate and culture, academic strategies, but also what's embedded in twice a month in rotation is cultural competency work and also restorative practice work. So we partnered with an amazing woman called, her name is Dr. Tamika LaSalle. She's from the University of Connecticut, and she's done all of her research on climate and culture, specifically around cultural competency. And we have ongoing monthly conversations in each small group that really target beginning to understand our differences and supporting and ourselves. And we've done a lot of work on implicit bias. The entire staff has done the Harvard implicit bias study. We've named white privilege, started having conversations around that. And it needs to be ongoing. It can't be something that is just going to come for a PD or a year. Dr. Tamika LaSalle has been in the district for 3 years now, and she's worked at every school doing this work. And it's been transformative. And to piggyback on that, we need a way to be able to talk about in a safe way when there's misunderstandings that happen. And a lot of times when students misbehave in class or react to something, oftentimes it's because they feel like they've been misunderstood or the teacher feels like they've been misunderstood. So then there's a dynamic. It doesn't mean that there aren't consequences. There's always consequences because we need to hold students highly responsible for and accountable for their behavior. But then what? So we have another partnership. His name is Adam Paderis, and he's from the School Empowerment Network. And he's coming in and monthly meeting with each collaborative learning team to really talk about who our students are and start helping the staff build the skills to have restorative conversations and being able to understand where they are, on top of having strong behavioral expectations, teaching students what they should be doing. And that's where all of this work becomes the fabric of how we do school and it not be separate. And another piece of the work is we have parents involved in it. We have a climate and culture team that helps be the architects of the way all of this work is done. And at, I think all the schools but the middle school, and I might be wrong, the middle school might have a parent, but all the schools have a parent and a student on this teacher leadership team to really make sure we're capturing the voice of the community. And it could have more than one parent. We're just lucky to have one right now. But that's what I believe. I think you need to name it. You need to really understand where your staff is, meet them where they're at, and move everybody forward in this conversation in a very safe way. Because a lot of this is about people just not understanding themselves and differences. And then the last thing, you have to celebrate the good stuff. You need to celebrate everybody's differences and really understand where everybody's very similar as well.
Very good, thank you. We're now going to go to Mr. Drummy.
Hi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Ferrick, this is going to be a three-part question.
Okay.
If you don't mind. How do I put it? What do you expect your top priorities to be in the first year, should you get the job, and 3 to 5 years down the line? And then how would you go about devising and implementing your objectives, and how would you get your senior staff or top staff to accommodate you and carry it on with you?
Sure, thank you. So if I understand what you're asking me, you want to know what I would prioritize my first year, what would the longer term 3 to 5 year goals look like, and how do I get my staff on board and help them do it? Okay. So first, what I want to explain is what I would come up with my top priorities by really entering Malden and understanding what are the priorities. After sort of meeting with a lot of the staff and families, I know safety around COVID is a significant worry, and how are we making sure that everybody's back in the building? But really pulling together, and listening to the community of educators, the families, what is the priority, looking at what the strategic plan is and making sure that we are aligned. I think, as I said, the first thing to do is to really make sure we bring kids back, and not only are kids feeling safe, that students are safe and families are safe sending their kids back. We're going to need to understand, what is the learning gap? Where have kids sort of slipped backwards over this past year in the COVID world? And also understanding that some kids may not have slipped back, and we can't hold them back from thriving if they're in the place to continue. So really being able to create a strategic plan to focus on assessing where our kids are and how do we move them forward, depending on what they need. Restructuring staff. I think about sometimes maybe you have a lot of reading teachers in the elementary school that really focus on small groups or individual kids. Maybe for the first few months of coming back, we're going to actually have to have the reading teachers support the teachers and coach teachers, because maybe teaching reading in a different way is going to be a tier 1 because there's been so much gap during COVID. 3 to 5 years, it's really about digging into the data. Where are we now? Understanding what the district wants to, where do they want to go? And what does that want to look like? So then creating the strategic plan and the priorities that align with that, and making sure that everything is very linear. We've got our strategic plan and our district priorities, making sure the budget is aligned with that. And that means in terms of the FTE count, do we have the right people doing the right jobs? Do we have enough money for technical support partners, if that's the way we need to go? Are we aligning professional development, time, and resources? That is also very linear. And I think one piece that I think that we've already named is making sure that 3 to 5 years that we're a much more inclusive, anti-racist community, that's what we live, walk, and talk. So I think that's one thing that would not veer. And I am a really strong proponent of distributive leadership. So making sure that the leadership team and administrators and teachers have a voice in where we're going and how we're going to get there. Because when you include the stakeholders in not just problem solving, but identifying the problems and using data to do that, problem solving, and then action planning, then you're all moving in the same direction. And that's what you need to happen. You want everybody, sort of pulling the rope in the same direction to make sure we're moving our goals forward.
All right. Next up, Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for your answers so far, Dr. Ferrick.
Sure.
The question that I have for you is centered around technology. So how would you go about looking at a technology plan for our future, and how would you involve in that discussion?
Say the second, how would I evolve? I didn't catch the second part.
I'll say it again. So how would you go about looking at a technology plan for our future?
Okay.
And who would you involve in that discussion?
Sure. I think in some ways, technology is probably one of the silver linings that has come out of COVID. We have seen in my district that students who were much more shy and very reserved in classroom have a much bigger voice in the virtual world, and are showing levels of conversation and work that they hadn't shown in person. So I think sometimes we can think about all the negative stuff that's happened as a result of the pandemic, but there are some positives. I think the first thing to do is get the people at the table who are really managing and supporting the technology, and understanding how the impact of technology is already had in each school for our kids. What does it look like? Are you at the point where you have one-on-one? What is the quality of the products that you have? Hardware, where are you at with software? And again, I think that needs to be done by looking at, just the facts of what you have, looking at academic data, how much of the work, like how are you using like Google Analytics to understand work completion? Has the model been effective in terms of technology? What has worked and what hasn't worked? Having the people at the table, honestly, I think part of the biggest misstep we had in my current district was when we rolled out all the technology was not having kids at the table. Because we thought like we had it down, and then all of a sudden kids get in and they're just overwhelmed by the Google Classroom and all the executive functioning pieces. And had we had kids at the table at the beginning, we probably would have short-circuited some of the challenges. And I also think in my current district, we had a really amazing technical support partner called Ready Learner One, who was really at our side, not just working with staff. They actually created, it wouldn't be professional development for students, but training, student facing to really make sure the students were getting everything they needed, because we had this belief that kids knew everything. And they didn't. They did not know how to cut and paste a document. They didn't know how to turn a Word document into a PDF. Just really simple things. So I guess that's what I would do to understand. I would need to understand the context of where we are.
Great, thank you very much.
Sure.
Ms. Spatafor.
Chair. So my question is around budget, and the school budget in Malden is one of our, if our top line item when it comes to, finances. So in this difficult fiscal climate, what process would you use to determine budgetary priorities? And what are some of your priorities in a school budget?
So I think for me, a budgetary process really begins, the first step is it's really a reflective process. I think you need to bring people to the table, administrators and building leaders, and really look at what was the goal of this year? What were the strategic priorities? And did the budget align up? And did we make progress on the priorities? Are we still moving in the right direction? So I think that's the first step. I also think it's a way, the budget is really a way of bringing people together. My experience is really starting with the FTE count and meeting with individual principals and department leaders, and just making sure that they have the right people doing the right jobs and that we're moving the district in the right direction. And that's like lots of conversation in what needs to change, where's the give, where's the take, what does the budget look like? The priorities need to be aligned with the district's strategic plan, because it takes, on average, 3 to 5 years for institutional change to happen. And you have to be able to sort of stay patient and believe that the work that you're doing and using data along the way to assess that we're moving in the right direction, just like little indicators along the way, and being able to not necessarily, I think educators often go for like the shiny new things, and it can really distract you from the work. So really living and breathing by a strategic plan, having it mapped out, and making sure the budget is aligned with it is the first thing. So I think my entry would be to really understand, like I pulled up the budget for 2021, and really was looking at where things were aligned. I think I would need to look a lot deeper than the public facing document, and really understand, and also understand that in light of the pandemic, maybe strategic strategies need to change. Like sometimes you might want to just say, okay, let's look at a zero-based budget and go from there. Like, what do we need? And look at it in a very different way, because school might look pretty different in the fall, given where we're at. And again, doing it collaboratively. Like there is a lot, institutional knowledge that all the educators and administrators have, that would have to, get me up to speed and and context. And I mean, Tony seems great. Like she seems really like she's got it and is really confident.
Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Spatafora. Next up, Mr. Iavino. Mr. Iavino.
Still muted.
Hello?
There we go.
Hi.
There I am. Okay. Technology. Dr. Ferrick, my question is about the pandemic. As a result of it, and the number of days that our kids have been in remote learning, there are going to be more than likely significant gaps in student achievement. So I'm curious as to what specific measures you would undertake as a superintendent to address and to assess those issues, and please try to be as specific as possible. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So I would guess if Malden is like most other districts, you created a task force kind of moving into the pandemic. I would do the same thing. I would create a task force in terms of trying to shift us out of the pandemic and really address the learning gaps. It's really important to understand what baseline data do we have on students that exist now? What are the assessment tools that you have and that people are familiar with to gather the data that we need? Do you have a universal assessment for social emotional issues? And if not, which one should we adopt in order to make sure that we're assessing students, not just on academics, but social emotional capacity and what they need as well? I know a lot of people struggle with the idea of taking time to assess kids. And honestly, in a perfect world, if we could bring kids in over like late summer and assess them outside of the school day, that would be really helpful because then we could hit the ground running a little bit quicker in terms of being able to group and understanding if we need to restructure classroom time to include intervention or acceleration for some students. And really understand what our FTEs are. Like for a lot of people, living through this pandemic has been trauma and it's been very traumatic, and we need to understand that the isolation and the fear is going to bring in another layer for not just our students, but our staff as well. So how are we going to meet the needs of all of our kids and our staff? I think one of the most important things to do as we're getting back into the rhythm of in-person school is really take the time to focus on building a sense of community in our classrooms and in our schools, because that is one of the most significant losses our students had, not being able to connect in person and have normal interactions with each other. And it's going to take like intention to create that sense of community that often just felt like it just sort of happened in the natural cadence of school. I also think what would be really important would be having parent-teacher conferences like in early September, bringing parents in to get their voice on how their kids are doing and what their experience was. We can't ever forget that our parents are our kids' experts. And the more information we have on our kids from different lenses, the better. And then I also think what you have to realize is that this can't be a one and done sort of let's assess our kids, figure out where they are, put interventions, in place. We need to continue doing it because kids are going to grow and fill in those gaps at different levels. And over time, some kids are going to continue to need some intensive support. Other kids are going to just need a little bit of support and are going to go. And then there's the kids who don't need any. And as I said, we can't hold them back. So really creating an action plan for the year together. And I think what we do is we become the architects, maybe with the task force. And then once we have a frame of what it should look like, each school takes that frame and makes it their own. And how are they going to implement it? How are they going to do their assessments? And what is it going to look like for each individual school?
Very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Over to Mr. Weldy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Ferrick. My question's around instruction, and it's, could you describe, it's a two-parter, could you describe some ways in which you have been an instructional leader in your previous roles? And on top of that, could you share an initiative that you were responsible for implementing that significantly changed either teacher practice or student outcomes, or both?
Sure. Instructional leader.
Good questions, huh, Dr. Ferrick?
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to think. It's like, how do you synthesize this question?
I know, we do it every day.
Yeah, into an answer. Yes, thank you. So I guess what I will tell you is I'll use an example at the high school that we're currently working with. We have our entire English department. There's one senior teacher and the other 3 teachers are within their first 2 years of practice. And although they have good instincts and they're going to be like amazing teachers, they're just not amazing teachers yet. So what we've done, part of the work we did probably about 1.5 years ago was institute a new curriculum. And we adopted guidebooks, which is actually a standards-based curriculum, actually through the Department of Ed through Tennessee. It's a very high, very, very rigorous, high standards curriculum. And we have worked together with me and instructional partners, who is a technical support partner, to really help support the implementation of the guidebooks. And what I think is really important is no matter how strong a curriculum is, where the rubber meets the road is in teacher practice. So we have spent a ton of time in PD, in coaching, in collecting walkthrough data, really focusing on not as much student outcomes, although we look at student work and data a lot. We know we're not going to see huge growth in that until we make sure the teachers are doing the practice in which they need. So it's taking a solid curriculum, which we've done, standards-based, rigorous, and supporting the teachers in implementing it. And what that looks like is, it looks like sitting down together and unpacking a unit, and then unpacking a lesson, and really talking about what is the instructional focus for this lesson, making sure the teachers understand that, what are the instructional practices that are high leverage in order to make sure that the students are learning that. And almost 2 years into it, we're really seeing some really significant growth in our teachers, which has been really exciting. So that's kind of an initiative. I kind of answered the question. But I also want to tell you, you cannot have instruction unless you have a safe learning environment. And that is one thing that has really been my bread and butter, is creating a tiered system of support between the intersection of rigorous instruction and teaching behavioral expectations that are predictable. Kids thrive when they walk into a room and they know what to do, when to do it, what's going to happen if they do something that's naughty, what are the consequences, when they're encouraged to keep doing the things that they're doing well and being acknowledged for it. And that's an initiative that I've done in my entire career, not just as a deputy superintendent or as a principal. It's really about creating the environment where kids and teachers can thrive with the instruction.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
All right, now let's hear from Mr. Gray.
Hi.
Good evening, Dr. Ferrick. We're going to tackle communication skills.
Okay.
Communication skills are instrumental to any leadership role and carry two key components: being a good listener, as well as being a strong communicator. As superintendent, your communication varies with different groups of people: city leaders, school committee members, staff, parents, even students. How accessible will you be to these individuals, welcoming ideas, thoughts, and concerns?
Sure, thank you. I think communication and trust are interlinked. I think when a school district or a school or a teacher is struggling with trust, it's honestly goes back to the fact that there isn't enough communication, because then people sort of, if they don't understand what's going on, they get in their own heads. And sometimes they think things that, aren't necessarily the healthiest, trust gets broken down. So for me, I believe being a superintendent is 100% about building relationships with everybody, and that comes with trust. And being able to communicate on multiple levels. So I can just tell you, for an example, in my current district, we do weekly emails that get blasted out on all social media. And that's right now, that's really focused on COVID. It gives an update on the COVID. We do emails every single day on update on COVID cases district-wide. And that goes out to the community, families, and the schools, and all the staff. At the end of the week, we send a summary of that all out. We do that. We communicate with all calls. We do email blasts, social media blasts, and much to my director of operations horror, I mail things out, snail mail, because I just think it's really important that not everybody is as tech savvy and don't even answer the phone anymore when Southbridge Public Schools call. So they're missing some of the all call. I think one of the most important aspects of communication, though, is in person. If I had my way to pick up a phone, send an email, or have an in-person meeting, hands down, it's an in-person meeting. I like to be able to interact through facial expressions and body language, because so much is said outside of just the words. I think a superintendent, especially one entering a new district, has to be unbelievably available. I would have office hours that would be scattered throughout the day at different times, in the evening, on the weekends if necessary. We would do that. And listen, I learn by context. I would need, and I ask a gazillion questions, I would need to continue to be an active listener and to really understand. And I can tell you, when I entered, 4 years ago, my current role, I didn't do that as well. And I made some pretty significant missteps and learned pretty quickly, like, wait a minute, just because I have, almost 20 years experience in my first district, Southbridge is different and Malden's going to be different. I can't come in with my own assumptions. I have to listen, I have to ask, and I need to understand. And that's with everybody. That's with students, and that's with families, that's with educators, and it's with community members. I think of the school district as being like a little ecosystem that's part of a much bigger ecosystem. And we have to all work together and understand the impact of all the good stuff that happens in a school positively impacts the city. But when things don't go right, it also could negatively impact the city. And how do we work together to make sure that we're on the same page and supporting each other?
Thank you, Dr. Ferrick.
Sure.
Over to Ms. Luong.
Hi, Dr. Ferrick. Thank you so
Hi.
much. So I have a question around some students. So here it goes. What experience do you have working with students with varied abilities? And specifically, what checks and balances will you put in place with your immediate staff to ensure that special education, ELL, and all students who need services are receiving those services appropriately? Sure.
I think that's been my whole world, working with kids that needed something different. So first, I can tell you, I think it's our job to meet the needs of all kids, whether they're identified with a disability, whether they're identified as needing language support. And we do that genuinely by creating a tiered system of support, by having a really strong tier one, which when you do that, rule of thumb is you're going to be successful with about 80% of the kids. When the kids aren't successful, what are we doing and what's in place to be able to identify what their needs are? So having a really strong student support team, having data that we can collect on kids along the way to understand what is it? Is it a struggle in math? Is it a struggle in reading? Is it a social emotional issue? Is it a behavioral issue? And being able to then have tier 2 and tier 3 supports interventions that we can put into place to help meet the needs. When kids are identified and that they like through special ed or through ELL, we need to make sure that we are servicing all of our students, honestly, in the least restrictive environment as possible. We know from research, the farther students get away from the general ed classroom, the more likely they're not going to be successful. So how do we meet their needs and build the teacher's capacity to support kids as close to the general ed classroom as possible? It's not a light switch. We can't just assume because we know inclusion is the best for students that teachers are ready for that or that students are ready for that. But how do we create that capacity within our buildings and within our staff? I'm a special educator. I have a child who has special needs, and it's unbelievably important that we meet their needs and their family needs very well. When I looked at your budget and saw, I think it was like 32% of the whole school budget is spent on special ed, it really makes me stop and think like, what if tier 1 was stronger and we're meeting more kids' needs? Maybe we wouldn't have to spend all that money on students identified with special ed, and it could be funneled back into general ed and meeting more kids' needs.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Last but not least, Mr. Froyo.
Hi.
I think you're on
mute.
There we go.
Malden High School is a comprehensive high school. If money were available, would you consider adding a few more technology education shops to make it a truly comprehensive high school?
I think that's a really good question, because I think part of our job right now is to create adults that are going to be successful, whether they go into college or career, and helping them understand how do you get to what you want to be, right? Like, and what is the trajectory of education? I think hands-on learning is hugely impactful for a whole number of kids. I think there's a lot of ways to do that, though. That doesn't always necessarily mean you have to add on into the high school. You can do that through community partnerships. You can find local employers who have the skills that our students want to learn and do internships and give them the opportunity to earn credits that way. But again, if this is a priority of the community, then we figure out how to make it happen. Because I think part of the job of a superintendent is, keeping, everything moving in the right direction. But it's also about being a steward for the voice and the wishes of the community as a whole. So finding that balance is really important. But I am a huge proponent for hands-on learning. And I just think there's lots of ways to do it. I wrote a couple of grants in both of my first and second district of partnering with the local vocational technical school, where kids could come and take academic classes at the comprehensive high school and then spend their afternoons and evenings learning shops at the technical high school. So there's lots of ways to meet the needs of kids that don't have to be huge budget busters either.
Second part of the question, what experience do you have working with vocational and college and career pathways?
Sure. I have experience in both. In my current district and my previous district, I created really strong early college pathways with our local community college, where students were able to take community college classes while they were in high school. So when they graduated, they not only got credits for their diploma, they actually left high school with a college transcript and the confidence and the belief that they could be successful in college. And in my previous district, a part of the school, the innovation school that was created, was all about technical opportunities. We created the carpentry pathway. We worked with we created a whole community garden and got all the supplies to create a commercial kitchen where we had local chefs coming in and working with the community and students with building their capacity around culinary, just to name a couple.
Thank you, Dr. Ferrick.
Sure, you're welcome.
All right, Dr. Ferrick, let's see if there were any questions not asked that people want to. Any questions of the members that either need clarification or you thought of during when we were asking questions?
Yeah, could I, Mr. Chairman?
Go right ahead, Mr. Iovino.
Thank you. Excuse me, Dr. Ferrick, in looking over your resume, which is very impressive, you were in the Lowell Public Schools and you were principal of the Career Academy. Can you tell me a little something about that and the implementation of the PBIS program?
So back in like 2010, 2011, I had been asked to take over a therapeutic day school, which is a school for students with significant social emotional disabilities. And instead of having the students attend out-of-district placements, Lowell had their own in-district, out-of-district placements. And after I got there and with great staff was able to stabilize the school, bring in all the resources that the kids need, I was asked to stay on and become the principal there. And as I was walking into to accept the offer, I called my husband and I said, "Can we afford a $10,000 pay cut?" And he said, "Okay." And I declined the position. And the assistant superintendent at the time said, "Come work for me. What do you want to do?" And I said, I want to deal with the dropout rate because the dropout rate was pretty high. And very long story short, pulled a whole bunch of people together and started looking at the data of all the students who needed something different, all the kids in Lowell that had been part of any alternative education program, school, or therapeutic day school. And we found out that 65% of the kids that had touched any of these programs did not graduate from high school. So it was really about what we need to do something different for our students because like Malden, Lowell had one high school. When I was there, it had about 4,000 students in it, and it was not meeting the needs of all of the kids. So was able to take the alternative high school program and transform it into a 4-year high school that was based on what do kids need. It was PBIS Foundation, which is a multi-tiered system of support focusing on social, emotional, and behavioral, and then worked under autonomies, which gave us, we were allowed to do high school differently. So we were able to create school that started at 7:30 in the morning and went until 8 o'clock at night. We had a full certified teacher-led computer lab. So if students needed to take some online classes because of whatever was happening outside of their lives, kids could have, they could come in the morning, they could come back and take a couple classes in the evening. We also had a full comprehensive, all classes were run by teachers as well, if you wanted to have in-person teaching, but really created an environment that was really to meet the kids where they were at. Was able to develop programs where they could get internships and externships. They could get elective credits for working. And I can tell you, when you've sort of done something right, when the comprehensive high school's calling you up and saying, "Hey, we've got a whole bunch of seniors that are on the cusp of not making it past the graduation finish line. Is there any way we can partner with you?" So we were able to create a pathway where kids could be duly enrolled in Lowell High School and the Career Academy, which gave them the flexibility of being able to do some of the anytime, anywhere credits, some of the online learning, taking classes above and beyond their 7-period day in the evenings at the Career Academy. And I have to tell you, like within a year and a half, we dropped the dropout rate, no pun intended, significantly in Lowell because we were meeting the kids where they were at, and it was not lowering the bar. It was just understanding that their kids' lives right now are really complicated, and creating mold where, you know, if you were a square peg, you didn't have to fit into a round hole.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. I think that just about does it, unless there are any other questions. Ms. Spatafor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to take Ms. Long's question in regards to special education and kind of combine it with Mr. Iovino's in regards to what would you do? So, you know, when we talk about FAPE and keeping kids in district, what would be your vision or steps to bring out of district students back in and maybe possibly create a therapeutic setting or a milieu setting within the public schools here?
Sure. So I get really excited about this because this is what I've done. So in Southbridge, we're a tiny little district. There's 2,000 kids. And for all intents and purposes, what are we doing with the therapeutic day school? But we needed to, because honestly, so much of our tier 1 was broken. We weren't able to honestly even identify who all our kids are. When I came to Southbridge, we had 2 students in out-of-district placement that weren't even identified as special ed. Like, that's how, like, yeah, like it was just, and I had adopted a alternative high school program. It was actually middle high school program. It was like grades, I don't know, like 7 to 10. And it was really about just any kid that might have been naughty, removed from the general ed setting and moved to this program. And it was extraordinarily unhealthy and unsafe, and worked with the state and worked with our educators to transform it into a therapeutic day school with a caveat, and this is the first time this has been done in Massachusetts. We were able to get it identified as a therapeutic day school for students identified with significant social emotional needs driven by their IEP, as well as students who just might need the small learning environment with the wraparound therapeutic services. And this, so that was, we did that a year and a half ago. And this year we just made it high school. And this year we actually expanded it to middle school. So it's now an 8 through 12 model. I think we saved $1.5 million the first year. And the money is really important, but you want to know what? We're educating our own kids. And that's what's really important to me, because we can do it better. Like, you have the right people meeting the needs of the kids. So first of all, like, yay, that's great. But what we need to know is who our kids are and what do they need, and then create the infrastructure to support them in the district. And that takes time, because you need to have entry and exit criteria. You need to know, you need the programs to be discrete enough that they're going to be successful. So really being able to identify student profiles of who is there. And then when they're in the general ed schools, then you start doing like transition, and they get to spend part of their day in inclusion. They get to be, spend part of their day with their more typical peers. Our job as educators is to help all students be the best they can and overcome whatever challenges they have. Because when they're adults, they're not going to have an IEP that's going to be trailing with them. It's about helping them, learn to cope and accommodate and adjust and become independent. So you do that by having as many kids as possible in your general ed schools interacting with their typical peers. And the other side of that is it helps build acceptance and with everybody, because students who don't necessarily have the disabilities learn how to work with peers that do. It's part of accepting diversity, just in a different lens.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, very good. Let me just ask one from the chair. So today the Metro mayors, not the Metro mayors, the Mass mayors met with Commissioner Riley to talk about what the Board of Education decided last week. And I was just curious as to your thoughts as to whether or not you think the time has come to return to in-person learning.
All right, so I have a little bit of a bias about this, because I'm going to preface this that we need to do what's right for our own community. But
Yep.
in my current district, we have about 2,000 kids in the district and we have 1,200 coming. 75% of all of our elementary kids are coming every single day, 5 days a week for full days, because that's what was needed in Southbridge. Our families needed to be able to get back to work. They needed to know that we were taking care of their kids. And then secondary, we have hybrid. Kids can come 2 days a week, 4 days a week, but they're all grumpy teenagers and prefer to stay home. So it's a little quiet in our secondary buildings. And I will also tell you, we've done it extraordinarily safely. We have had less than 0.5% of our combined student and adult population test positive for COVID, and not a single transmission in school. I have been living, breathing, and dying by managing all this. It's a 24-hour-a-day job. We have unbelievable systems and structures in place. We have a nurse that we pulled out of the school to lead all of this work with me. So having said that, it was right for Southbridge, but I understand that's not where Malden is. And the teachers asked me this question, and I said, well, good thing that, you get to do, because you have the autonomy of being a school district in Massachusetts, you get to make these decisions. And then, my gosh, a week later, Riley and the governor blew that out of the water. I think whatever we do, we have to meet everybody where they're at and do it slowly and safely. One of the students on one of your panels told me she was scared. She said, I know we all want to come back, but I'm really scared. So I explained to her that we can do it. And she had talked about how she felt like the teachers, she went in for her PSATs and there was supposed to be all these really rigid COVID rules. And she felt like the teachers didn't follow them and it made her feel unsafe. And I said, you're right. It's on us as the adults to make sure we're doing it. So I think, honestly, we can do it, but we need to meet all of the adults and the families where they're at and do it in a very transparent, cohesive way that's right for your community.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ferrick, on behalf of the entire school committee for your interest and willingness to be here with us this evening. So,
thank you for having me.
All right, very good. So now we'll entertain a motion to adjourn until our next interview. Is that correct, Mr. Waldeck?
Unless you wanted to give Dr. Ferrick a chance to give a closing statement if she'd like.
Would you like that, Dr. Ferrick?
I honestly feel like I've kind of said it all. I can tell you I would be thrilled to be the superintendent in Malden. All of this process did not scare me away. It just got me more and more excited. I have to tell you, when I met with the central office staff, it felt like a really nice fit in terms of personalities and people. And the teachers seemed like they were real. And there's some work to be done with the climate and culture around the adults and making sure everybody's feeling good about the work that they're doing and being part of the conversation. I think that came out pretty loud, that they want to be part of moving the district forward and their voice being present. So
all right, very good. Thank you. So, Mr. Waldeck, Ms. Spadafora, tell us what's up next. After tonight, we'll be back Wednesday, I believe, right?
We'll be back Wednesday at 6 p.m., Thursday at 6 p.m., and then the committee expects to come together on Monday, March 15th at 6 p.m. To deliberate and make a final determination.
All right, there you have it, everyone. So thank you again for taking time to be here. We also want to thank Rosetta Languages, who we'll see again this week, and we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Spadafora, seconded by Mr. Froyo. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The school committee is hereby adjourned.